Hey, what's up guys? Sir Emanon here, bringing to you today a updated deck profile of my blind second Lunalight list, and this is something that I actually didn't expect to return to so quickly. I know it's been a couple of months at this point, but I really didn't think I would play this deck again, but I decided that I would just take this deck to locals, kind of for fun, because this is the last week before Dual Overload, and honestly, probably one of the last locals I'll go to, just because of how widespread the panic is. The locals might close down soon, maybe. But yeah, I decided that I would just go ahead and have fun with blind second Lunalights. And in case you're wondering why there's nothing on the screen, I'm going to do this video a little bit differently. So I got first place at locals today, and I wanted to just share with you guys kind of my deck building process as far as the card choices, my locals metagame a little bit, and how I kind of prepare for that. So you guys can kind of like take bits and pieces as far as the way that I approach deck building. And then I also have another copy of my actual deck saved on Dueling Books, so we'll go back and see if my memory is actually that good, which I typically do a very good job at memorizing my deck lists anyway, so like that's just because I think about them a lot, to be honest. But yeah, obviously, let me know if you guys do enjoy this kind of formatting of the video. I always, like to try new stuff. So if you enjoy this, definitely leave a like on the video. And if not, just leave a comment telling me that you prefer, the way that I used to do things, like just have everything on screen. Granted, there will be all the cards on the screen in, a very clean list at the end of it. So definitely, you can go ahead and reference that anytime that you need to. But I just figured that this would be a good chance to kind of just talk about the way that I deck build and just kind of the overall process of how I go about, approaching any build that I try and make. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the list here. So we're going to start off with the engine cards, as always. It's 3 Kaleido Chick, 3 Tiger, 2 Martin, 1 Emerald Bird. Pretty self-explanatory, to be honest. Kaleido Chick's your graveyard setup. You need to set up your Martin in grave so you can revive it back off Tiger. Martin is like your extender. Emerald Bird is also really good as an extender in pretty much every build, even in like a blind second build where although you're not aiming to combo as heavily as you are in, say, a blind first list, this card adds a lot of utility in just drawing it in combinations of cards like Martin or Serenade Dance a lot more frequently, just because of the virtue of going second. Getting that extra card actually opens up those types of hands quite more often. And also, this card is really good because when you are forced to go first, or if you need to make a recovery play after breaking your opponent's board but not being able to kill them that turn, this also just helps you out because it is an extra extender that helps you get the bodies on board. And the recursion of being able to revive, banished resources is really, really key, especially in cases where like you have to link away your Martin that you use off its own effects without making it exceed first. So this card just has a lot of utility, and it's never a card that it was a card I would never cut, basically. And then the 10th and honorary Lunalight card is Zephyrs. So this shouldn't really need explaining either. It's just more repeatability of the same stuff that you're doing. So next up we got the spells. So we got 3 Tenki as the searcher. Obviously we got 3 perfume, if I can spell. We got 3 perfume. Nothing much to say there. 3 foolish burial goods, just max consistency. And we got regular foolish burial. This is really good because there is another card that you'll see later on when we go to the blind second portion of this list that is pretty good to send off this. And you can also send Zephyrs because I opted not to play Curious in this build, so it just allows you to have that flexibility of not relying on like committing resources to making force tricks and then making another play specifically to be able to pitch a card, so like say a Nightmare Phoenix or a Unicorn, to get this engraved. So like this just makes things a bit easier in that department, and it can also help you get set up if you are opening a bit of an awkward hand. So yeah, definitely what I would consider a staple in this deck for sure. And then finally, we got the 1 Lunalight Serenade Dance. So this is what I would consider to be the core 21 Lunalight cards, like the archetypal cards, plus the related support and basic consistency. So these are the 21 that I always start off with pretty much in every single Lunalight list. That's kind of a good place to start. Is like I always start with this and then build off from there, because there's never a Lunalight list where I don't include these 21 cards, that's for sure. Next, we got extra superior extenders, I guess you can call it. So I opted to play Dangers for several reasons. So I'll talk about the ratio that I played. So I did 1 Nessie, 2 Jackalope, and 2 Mothman. So the reason I did this ratio is that a lot of this revolves around Mothman being a level 4, because I'm gonna insert a bit of a spoiler here. I did play the Utopia double package, so just getting access to that level 4 is pretty important. Being able to utilize these in hand when you're going second is a lot better because it ensures that you are going to get the level 4 more often because you are pitching for cards like Phoenix and Unicorn, like I mentioned earlier. You can pitch these. You also have Perfume to get these out of your hand and get a level 4 on board. So just extra level 4s is the way to go. And you need a little bit more filler in this deck. I decided, I just needed more engine cards, and I didn't really feel like playing more normal summons. I felt like, I like Armageddon Knight a lot, but when you are going second, you're a lot more likely to just see your combo pieces. Your percentages go up fairly considerably. So just having the 3 normal summons is fine. I would rather have 3 than 4 in a lot of cases, especially when going second, again, because of those, those mathematical percentages. And you'll notice that I didn't play Snake. And it's because, again, I didn't play Curious in this list. And the reason I didn't play Curious is that there's no big combo involving it because I'm not really sending a Floodgate. It's also not really needed for consistency either because, again, you are super likely to see a lot of your engine cards because you're drawing 6. And these help dig for them, that's true. But you're not relying on them as much. And also, there is a couple, actually there's one in particular, but there is one of the blind second cards that actually helps you set up your engine even just a little bit. So it just kind of alleviates the burden that you have on dangers actually getting you there. And so I really didn't want to focus on Curious because I also just dislike how much you bottleneck yourself into that play when you have to commit to it, and then you can just lose out to any disruption. So any way I can to kind of just avoid that line, I try and do. I like Curious as far as what it does when it is able to resolve successfully, but when it can't, then you're just really, really sad. So Snake isn't really conducive to getting Mothman, and it's also not it's not really useful when you don't need to dig and you don't need to make Curious, basically. So that's kind of the reasoning behind that. So that's it for all the basically engine cards plus extenders. So the rest of it is all focused and tailored towards binding second. So if you guys have been following sort of this timeline of blind second Lunalight lists, know that I posted one in about January. Right before the ban list went into effect. It was the last regional that I played at, literally the weekend right before the ban list went into effect. So I played one of the most powerful cards that in, I believe, the blind second Lunalight list that I think should be included whenever the format suits it, and that is 3 copies of Shaddoll Fusion. Now, if, again, going back to that little timeline, I did post an updated build of that deck about a week or 2 later, and I opted to cut that card at the time because the format was still fresh. So I really thought that there was going to be an abundance of control decks, like back row decks that didn't put monsters in the extra monster zone. So, or summon monsters from the extra deck in general. So I really just didn't think that Shaddoll Fusion was going to resolve guaranteed as much as I would have liked, because this isn't a Shaddoll Lunalight hybrid. This is just a Lunalight blind second with a small Shaddoll package, just using Fusion as a pretty much a big bomb card, right? Because it gets you so much advantage on its own, being able to send Martin to search for a Serenade Dance. So that gets you a +1, and then you can send a Dragon, which I played, to get another plus to pop a back row. So you literally can go +2 with this card. So I think that when this card does resolve, it is one of the most impactful cards in the entire deck. But I initially thought that, against control matchups, this isn't as good, so I decided just to cut it for cards that would be consistently live across multiple matchups. But just with the way the format's been developing, control decks have really fallen out of favor significantly. Not only because of side deck cards like Evenly Matched and Lightning Storm and Twin Twister and all of that, but simply because a lot of the decks have many tools in their main deck to be able to just combat back row naturally. This is a deck that's a very good example of that. It has a very, very good Altergeist matchup and a pretty good Guru matchup as well. Really, this deck, again, only really loses... If you've been watching my Road to 1000 Duel Links rating series, I did talk about this in one of my recent videos, but you don't really care as much about single point interactions like Solemn Strike or a Protocol or a Fiendus. You can play through all those types of cards. The only real issue is Floodgates. And provided that your opponent doesn't open one, you really don't care as much about backer decks, because the strength that this deck has against them is that you're really just able to threaten resources every single turn by just having your Tiger looping with Martin and everything. So I really felt that the control matchups I didn't really need to focus my deck on, especially because there's not actually that many control decks at my locals. So I guess I can talk about my locals metagame a little bit. So there's a lot of Rogue for sure. And my matchups today were, it was something like Invoke Shaddoll, heroes or blue eyes, heroes, and then rare infernoids. So definitely a lot of diversity. I believe I only saw one spiral, and I didn't really see. I saw one Geist as well. There were like 17 people, so I didn't really see too many of one deck. So I decided like because there's a lot more combo than control in the format in general, as well as my locals, and the fact that really I should have an easier time against control decks in general. I felt that Shaddoll Fusion would be like the highest impact go second card I could play because it goes into Winda, which is really really good because Winda adds this back. So like you get a delayed plus off that as well. So you just get a lot of free fodder to pitch and do free things with, especially in tandem with like nightmares and dangers and stuff. But also it's just really really solid in terms of just getting your engine online if you are missing like Lunalight names, because if you only have say like one tanky or one foolish goods and you can only get that one search, then this just means that you're able to search for Tiger and not have to worry about getting chick access because well you have like you have Serenade Dance and you already have Martin and Graves, so like you already are pretty good on resources in the like or like the Lunalight monster department as far as getting like the engine started. So like all you would really need at that point would be something like a Tiger. So it just makes the whole deck a lot more flexible, and that's what I meant by this little package here. Strengthens consistency because of the fact that like you don't really need to always just see like these core 21 anymore. Like normally you would rely on the dangers to help get you there to the missing things, but it's not as consistent or as reliable as something like Shaddoll Fusion, assuming that the Shaddoll Fusion obviously resolves. So like this is guaranteed to get you graveyard setup, and that's what I really like about this card. It just is really really awesome in this deck, and I can't overstate how much I love this card. I really wish I drew it more. And Dragon is what I was alluding to earlier with the Foolish Burial. Like you can Foolish this in situations where you just need out back row, and that's okay too. And drawing it's fine if you can hit it off a danger. That definitely happens a lot more than I would think, but yeah, it's definitely very good. All right, enough about Shaddoll Fusion. The next thing that I knew I was going to incorporate, like Shaddoll Fusion was pretty much an auto include given the format and given the way that I like to play the deck when I blind second. So the next thing to supplement it with is a card like a Mind Control. So Mind Control serves many different purposes. It is essentially always a guaranteed extender that also outs a problem card at the same time. So I mean that's just what Mind Control does in pretty much every build of like a blind second deck, not even just Lunalights, but just blind second decks in general. That's what Mind Control is used for. So obviously, why wouldn't we play it? It's really good as an out to Winda because you can just take it and go on your merry way. They have to have El Shaddoll Fusion in order to be able to stick another one. So like if they don't have that specific setup, then you can just get rid of your biggest problem with one card, and it's a really really good time. And to kind of pair with that, I also went with the 3 copies of Instant Fusion. So this is a card that is somewhat projected to be banned. It actually just got limited in the OCG off their newest FNL list. But this card is 3 more outs, so we have like 5 outs now to El Shaddoll Winda. And Instant Fusion, obviously getting restrict is really really good. But Winda is another good Instant Fusion target that we're already playing because of Shaddoll Fusion. And there is actually a cool little way that we can get Winda to stick on our board if we are forced to go first and open our combo with Instant Fusion. So that's pretty cool. So Instant Fusion is good both going first and going second. Restrict taking a card is like exactly the same as Mind Control in a lot of cases. It just kind of sucks if you are specifically against that scenario where they have a Winda and they have an El Shaddoll Fusion, because this expends your special summon, whereas if you have Mind Control it doesn't, so you can at least like try and follow up a little bit. But generally speaking, if you open combinations of these, like if you open these together, you're in a very very good spot, or like this with Shaddoll Fusion. And Shaddoll Fusion's kind of an out to Winda. Like at the very worst you can just crash, and if they don't have Alistair, then that's a pretty solid way to out the Winda, and get another card back in the process. So like you lose your battle phase that way, but at the very least you are allowed to just continue with your plays as normal. So yeah, that's why I really like Instant Fusion. And then next up is a card that I was deliberating on. I was going to have Super Poly in here, but I didn't really like the way that Super Poly just wasn't alive in every single matchup, and I would have to play a lot of different targets, and the extra deck space is really tight, and that it wasn't as solid going first. So I decided to actually just go with Cyframe Gear Gamma and the Driver. So kind of going back to a little bit of Time Thief Lunalights, So basically, like this is obviously a very, very good card going second, just as a generic hand trap. But when you are forced to go first in games 2 and 3, then this helps alleviate that issue because you have an in-engine way to get to it. So like you're not really ever going to struggle that badly going first. And I had a lot of instances where I would tell people to go second if I win the die roll, and then they'll make me go first. But I don't really mind because, like I mentioned, Instant Fusion's fine because you have ways to get a window on your field if you open this, and like you have ways to search this. So like a lot of your go second cards are actually really good going first as well. Obviously, Shaddoll Fusion and Mind Control aren't as powerful in those cases, but still, like you have a lot of really good powerful options, and like worst case scenario you can like keep Mind Control in and just use it for the following turn to push later. So that's also pretty good. And the 40th card is the Double or Nothing because I already spoiled that I was playing the Utopia double package. So this is just a way to close out games. It's the win condition that I always drew. I always drew this card, and I resolved Utopia double 0 times. But that's not a reason to cut it. Just because it happened at one tournament doesn't mean that it's a bad card. Happens, you know, sometimes you just draw this card a lot or you don't need to. Like maybe your opponent's monsters are in defense position, or they're a bit too big, or they have like ways to get themselves off the field in certain scenarios. Like I mentioned I played against Infernoid, like you can't really Utopia double them if they have like the small Infernoids on board because they can distribute them and get them off the board. So Utopia can't attack directly. So that kind of niche things like that is sort of what impeded this card from being like the blowout card that it's supposed to be, but definitely is not a card that I would cut from this kind of build. It's a lot easier to get access to than like jumping through hoops to get Leo Dancer, even though I really love Leo Dancer. But I think you should pick one or the other, not both, because playing both just is way too many extra deck spots in my opinion. So I decided to just go with the path of least resistance in my view and go with this. Alright guys, so that's going to do it for the main deck actually, and we're now going to move on to the extra decks. So first off, we're going to start with the fusions, since we're playing Shaddoll Fusion and Instant Fusion. They're pretty important. So first, we played the 1L Shaddoll Winda. Pretty self-explanatory, obviously the Shaddoll Fusion target. And also, like I mentioned previously, you can bring this out off Instant Fusion, and there is another card in the extra deck that enables you to keep the Winda on the board, which is very, very nice as a go first option. So as you can see, like Instant Fusion is one of the cards that serves as, you know, ostensibly a very, very strong go second option, of course, like all of this bottom row and the Shaddoll Fusions and stuff, but it has dual purpose in being able to be used going first, because obviously you can't side out all 14 of these cards when you're forced to go first, or if you have, you know, a premonition that your opponent's going to make you go first. So having the versatility of cards being multi-purpose is very, very beneficial in a world where you don't have the side out targets, or you just want to, you know, have cards be as live as possible. Also in instances where like your opponent's also blind seconding in game 1. So Instant Fusion is one of those cards similar to Gamma, of course, where you can use these freely going first or going second, and there's just a lot of impact and value to be had in both respects. So I really like those, or that aspect, that advantage. It's very, very powerful. So next up for the fusions, continuing on, obviously we got the Thousand Eyes Restrict. Of course, this is for the going second play. Just take a monster. It would be nice if we had Curious with this, because these are both spellcasters. But again, I didn't really miss Curious to the degree where it actually interfered with consistency, so I just chose to stick with the sole purpose of using these for their desired effects with the fusion monsters. And generally that's good enough in a lot of cases, because you know, you are actually like increasing consistency whenever you do open Shaddoll Fusion, like I mentioned earlier. So like having any access to pretty much most of these top 3 rows, like about 29 of this 40 card deck is just straight up engine cards. So like that's actually really, really powerful when you think about it. And drawing like most 2-card combinations of these cards just allows you to play the game in its entirety. So really, really like that, and that's why I think that, you know, Curious isn't like that necessary, even though it is nice to just have like these have even more utility. Like maybe in a world where we have more extra deck space, you can accommodate it, but in an extra deck that's as tight as Lunalight, I don't think that's really gonna work out in this case, but maybe one day. Alright, so next up we got the Utopia package, of course, because we're playing Double or Nothing. So we play the Vanilla Utopia and Utopia Double. This is about as self-explanatory as it gets, to be honest. And then we got Force Tricks, of course, because we are trying to play combo cards. Still going second. Like, this is just a very, very nice searchable extender. It's very good because you have a lot of like discard outlets when you're going second, like I mentioned with the dangers enabling you to get to Mothman. This is like the same thing where like you can freely get this engrave, or like if you search Serenade Dance off of Shaddoll Fusion sending Martin, then like you can send this or pitch this and then like send this, and that gets you like a lot of pluses just for performing a very, very simple play. So yeah, it's really, really nice just to have this still as an option, and being able to search it definitely comes up. And there are cases where you link this off into Durimadol, which I do also play. I'll get to that later, but this helping get into Durimadol is also really, really good. All right, next we got utility XCs. So we got, of course, the format staple for a long time, Dweller. Very, very good as a blind first option, or even if you crack boards against, say, like Invoke Shaddoll, and or Salamangre is another good example, like where like you can break the board but can't necessarily OTK. Then this is like a good rank 4 to kind of end on. In a lot of cases, like I guess Salamangre is not the best example, because in a lot of cases in that deck or against that deck, like if you are able to assemble a rank 4, it's just gonna be double or nothing, if assuming you actually successfully cracked through, say, like Rages and Roars and stuff. But this is still like a good secondary backup option. And of course, like I mentioned, it is very, very good going first, because your plays are somewhat limited as compared to a dedicated go first build. Obviously, you can't have your cake and eat it too. So just having the ability to have at least some way to pivot based on the matchup is very, very nice. Same kind of deal with Tornado Dragon. If you're going against a backer deck and they force you to go first, you can make this and feel generally pretty comfortable. And it's also just very, very good going second as just a navigational tool to just out problem back row. One of the most all-around versatile cards. Another card is Brotherhood of the Fire Fist Tiger King. If I can find it, there's 2 pages of Fire Fist cards. There we go. All right, so yeah, we got Tiger King, which is a very, very good card, especially going second, because getting you extra access to that Tenki is really, really solid, especially when you can pair it with its negation effect, which just gets an added value. There are instances where you want a second copy of Tiger, or like awkward hands where you rely on Serenade Dance, and like you don't really have a great way, like maybe you're like relying on Serenade Dance and a normal summon to Martin or an Emerald Bird, but you can't like feasibly get into Tiger in any like meaningful capacity, so you are forced into making this to get the Tiger like in the first place. But a lot of the time, like having even just the luxury of going into this negating your opponent's board that has like negations or just other, you know, annoying effects to deal with, and then getting a second copy of Tiger is like really, really strong. It allows you to like do really cool Durimadol plays as well, just popping your own Tiger and stuff. Same deal with Tornado, of course. And the next Xyz is I actually played Redoer. Shouldn't be a surprise, simply because this pairing with the Lambda is very, very good to search Gamma. Comes up in both going first and going second scenarios, so really, really liked it because it's just it's again a continual threat. Phantom +1 every turn. It allows you to just, you know, have good board presence even when your hands aren't like particularly strong when you're going first. And if you are forced to end on, again, like a board yourself after you crack your opponent's board, it's not ever going to be like the most threatening board, but if you can like stick a Lambda plus Redoer into searching Gamma, then that's pretty good if you are already able to run your opponent low in resources. So generally really like that. And then the final Xyz monster, which is probably my favorite one in the entire deck here, and maybe the one I made the most, one of the ones I made the most anyway, was Light Dragon Adignister. So this card is a very, very solid card going second, because surprisingly this deck lacks a lot of monster removal going second that isn't concentrated in the main deck. So if you don't open cards like Mind Control or Instant Fusion, then you are actually somewhat up the creek without a paddle in a lot of builds, because like not many people are playing stuff like Nightmare Cerberus, and like the only real monster removal that leaves you with is something like Nightmare Unicorn. And there are occasions where it's like kind of inconvenient to get to, or like you really want to make Unicorn and then like go into Borosword after, but the Link 3 being there is just really awkward. Granted, you have the Utopia double package to make that easier, but again, like I mentioned when I was talking about Double or Nothing, there are just certain instances where you can't make use out of it for various reasons. So this is another very, very fantastic way to actually out opponents like problematic monsters, like face-up monsters, even just big bodies that are on the board. And this thing doesn't target either. So you are able to destroy face-up monsters by attaching a material from this card up to the number of added necessary monsters you control, which obviously includes itself. And it also has a really niche effect where you can summon link monsters back from your graveyard if you have like other cybers. It doesn't really come up in this deck because I believe this is the only cybers that I play. Yeah, this is the only cybers that I play to my memory. Yeah. So like it doesn't come up in this build, but like it could conceivably come up if you play like I don't know, something like a Trisbana, I guess. But like that's also kind of a neat effect. But the really cool one is the first effect, where if a monster you control will be destroyed by card effect, you can attach a material from this card instead. So this is the player I'm talking about with Winda. So you can instant fusion for Winda after you summon your Light Dragon. Like this is the last thing you would summon in the turn. End phase, instant fusion attempts to destroy Winda, but similar to Dingirsu, this just protects it. So you were able to have the kind of infamous Orcus board with like just Winda, and that's sometimes enough to win games by itself, and it's kind of incredible. And you are able to, of course, just optionally choose to keep it if you want to. So you can let it die off instant fusion since it checks at every end phase. So say like after your opponent's turn, like you stun them for a turn, you really want to go off and combo on your own turn just to be able to OTK your opponent. You just let the Winda die off the Administer. And then you'll still have one material underneath it, so you can use this other effect, pop a card or pop a monster, and just proceed to do very, very well, or do very, very nicely from there. I will mention that I actually didn't play IP Masquerader in this build, and it would have been nice because like my board ended up being all the time Lambda plus Light Dragon plus Winda, which is significantly weaker than IP plus Light Dragon plus Winda, but you know, I ended up not having enough space to accommodate everything. But just for future reference, if you wanted to like focus more in on this combo, IP would probably be a better choice, simply because you can use the Light Dragon plus the IP to go into Unicorn if something were to ever threaten the Winda. So that's pretty good. And oftentimes, like if you spin back like whatever they're trying to normal summon or anything, then like they really won't have any way to deal with the Winda, and then you can just kind of go from there on your following turn. Alright, so that's it for the Xyz monsters. Next, for the links, we got Boros Sword, which is the other way to OTK. It's not redundant with these two. There's just a lot of times where this is easier to make, or like you're staring down an empty board and you can't use this to game them. This is still definitely needed. We played some Nightmare cards, so we played Phoenix and Unicorn. These are the best ones, and Cerberus isn't needed if you play the Light Dragon. It's nice to have the extra monster removal, but like again, you only have so much space, so you gotta use it as well as you can. So yeah, Light Dragon I think fulfills that niche while also having the cool interaction with Winda. And additionally, we played Firefighting Darumidal, which obviously is something that I keep mentioning. But yeah, this card is very, very powerful at being able to extend your plays in certain instances, or just get rid of problematic back row. It's very, very easy to make. If you go down a line of Force Strix or Tiger King, you can just link them off into this, and that's pretty good. Of course, pre-Master Rule 5, you have to consider things like that, but I'll of course have builds for post-Master Rule 5 as well, not to worry. And then finally, we of course have the Sci-Frame Lord Lambda as our final link, pairing up with the Gamma Redoer play and just being a generic. Right, so the side deck is kind of a bit interesting. So even though I said there's not a lot of control decks at my locals, I decided to side heavy for it anyway, just because a lot of these going second cards are not very potent against the backer decks. So to that extent, I actually played one copy of White Rabbit in the side deck. This is a card that I'm on and off about, especially more in like the pure lists, the ones that aren't as combo heavy, but it's just a nice in-engine way to just force out back row, and that's really, really good to have. Just being able to grab it off Tenki or off Perfume or off Serenade Dance whenever you need it, or like you can do the play where you like send it off Collider Chick in your opening setup, and then later on revive it off Tiger, then bounce it off Martin, and then like normal summon White Rabbit, special summon like a chick from grave, and then use it to bounce 3 back row, which is like really, really powerful. So yeah, it's a nice just kind of toolboxy card that is already searchable within your engine that gets you to out back row, which is pretty good, or at least force it. And then to that end, more effective cards in the side deck for that. We got 3 Twin Twister, 3 Evenly Matched, and a copy of Red Reboot. So the siding plan is Basically, against the control decks, if you're going second, you can side out like the entire Shaddoll fusion package. You can side out the entire gamma package and then put those 8 in. If you're going second, depending of course on the matchup, like some matchups you would want to keep gamma in, usually not against control as much. Like maybe you opt to side out mind control instead. But you have a lot of leeway, and even when you're going first, like you can like just skip out on the evenlies, but like side 4 with the Shaddoll fusion package, or you can like side 5 with reboot and like just work with what you have. Like you got a lot of flexibility in terms of side out patterns and things of that nature. All right, so next I wanted something that was really good going first. So I decided to actually play a copy, or 3 copies rather, of Solemn Strike. So the reason I went with Strike is just that it's a good catch-all card, and I was thinking about playing something like Sanctum, but there is another card that I actually sided in the side deck that is an extra deck card that kind of just deals with that. Not like completely, but like it just like curbs your opponent enough. So like this is kind of like an additional layer of negation, which I think this deck lacks. Of course, you have Gamma that is searchable, but just like having additional layers of protection is like I think really good. And people would typically not side in back row removal against your deck, obviously, because you're playing Lunalight. So like you can get away with siding something like this. You could play Sanctum, like I mentioned. You could play Different Dimension Ground, things of that nature. But I decided to go with Strike just because it's the safest. And again, it's a locals meta, so you really just want to, in my case, prepare for just expecting various random matchups. And then the final card, you guys might be disappointed to see this in the list because a lot of people hate this card, but I mean, it's just too good not to play. 3 Mystic Mine. So why is Mystic Mine in the side deck and not in the main deck when you are already binding second? So I think Mystic Mine is good in certain matchups where like you're able to force certain disruptions or interactions and then stick a Mystic Mine. So ideally you would pair it with something like an evenly matched against like a Spiral Board, for example. Whereas like with these cards, like there are some cases where you can force things, but like in other cases, it's just not enough in a lot of scenarios. Like Mind Control can maybe force like the Tri-Gate, but then you still have to deal with Sleeper. So like just adding in more ways to like get mine to stick is a pretty good option to have. And also like I don't like it in certain matchups as well. I think this is actually cuttable, even though I said it was really good just now, but it is good at like allowing you to gather resources, specifically because you're playing Utopia Double, right? Because the idea would be to stall until you have enough time to be able to assemble Double or Nothing, and then go in and OTK from there. And you can actually out your own mine if you want to. You can Doom It All pop it. You can Tornado pop it. You can, obviously, if you draw a second one, just set it over the first one. But you have ways to kind of deal with it. You could technically Shaddoll Dragon pop it too if there's like a way that you can figure out how to do that. Like maybe you send Serenade Dance to grade with the goods and you like hard draw the Shaddoll Dragon. Like you can Serenade Dance, send the Shaddoll Dragon as an effect, and then this triggers to pop your own mine. You can do that. So there's like, fun little ways you can actually toy around with Mystic Mine if you want to, but I don't think it's like necessary either to play because it kind of contradicts with like some of what you're trying to do. So like this is the card that I was like most unsure about, and to be honest, I actually never even cited it in, but I think like just in theory this card is like super strong in the metagame right now, so that's why I decided to stick with it. And then finally the last card is another go first option. So I played a copy of Bagooska in the side. So Bagooska is not really a card that complements the strategy very well. It is a very good going first card, of course, but you're not always well, you're not trying to go first, first of all, but like you're not always making this over something like a Dweller or like a Redoer, especially like in the mid to later stages of the game. Like maybe if you simplify the game state and then stick a Bagooska, it's fine, but in a lot of cases I just think that you're able to perform the OTK first off, but also like there are just generally like fine enough options to where like I don't think this was needed. I would have liked to have played everything, but again, space is just extremely tight. So yeah, that's gonna do it for this deck profile. Let's see how close we got to the actual list, which is up here. Oh, I had this sorted differently. Let's actually just click A to Z. All right, let's see. Does this look similar to this? I'm gonna click A to Z. Let us find out. Yep, it's the same list. All right, so cool. So yeah, that is kind of just my approach to deck building and how you kind of like understand just my mindset and thought process behind this list. Going second, like there's a lot of considerations to make as well. Going first with comboing, there's like a whole host of other factors that you have to take into account. But I think this is generally a good place to start if you want to just kind of pick my brain a little bit. But anyways, that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like as well as any thoughts or feedback in the comment section down below. Feel free to subscribe for more informative and competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content. If you want to, you can follow me on Discord, Twitter, or Twitch. All 3 links in the description as always. And once again, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, I'll catch you in the next video. See you guys.